Is Star Trek Prodigy worth your time? Find out the answer to that question right now. Hey Trekkies, welcome back to another episode of Yelling About Star Trek. My name is Christian Fox, and this is the show where I yell at you about all things Star Trek for your amusement. Today, I want to do a very short, very brief, very concise, spoiler-free review of Star Trek Prodigy. As you know, Star Trek Prodigy is an animated Star Trek series, but kind of the main thing that is really exciting, aside from the fact that it is the very first show that is meant primarily for kids, well, I should say first show of recent years, because obviously there is Star Trek the Animated Series, which was a kids cartoon. But this is the first modern Star Trek series that is meant primarily for kids. So that's one of the big things about this show. But of course, the thing that got me most excited is that Captain Janeway is back. Captain Janeway is back. Taking Captain Janeway outside of the equation for a second, what do I think of the actual episode? Well, I gotta say, I liked it. I don't know that this was the most incredible piece of Star Trek ever, which it's very difficult for shows to achieve that, especially when it's a pilot, but it felt like Star Trek, which I know is a weird thing to say because it's Star Trek, so of course it's going to feel like Star Trek. But when it comes to a lot of the new shows, they haven't always felt like Star Trek to me. Some of them feel like Star Trek more than others. Even with something like Star Trek Discovery, it's a good show and I quite enjoy it, but it doesn't always feel like Trek. It feels Trek adjacent in a weird way. And I don't know if it's because it's so modern and because the technology is so different or what it is, but it just doesn't quite feel like Trek. Prodigy to me felt like Trek as a kid's show, which is probably the highest compliment I can give it, because I know it's a kid's show, but it still felt like I was watching an episode of Star Trek. So I think that is great. And just even looking at the characters, I felt like the characters were great. I don't know them that well because I've only seen the first episode, but they seem like people I'm going to gel with. They felt like Star Trek characters. Yes, obviously a little bit more kiddie, but they felt like Trek because they were so positive. Star Trek is always about positivity and hope and the belief that we can do better, and these characters seem to genuinely believe that. So I think that's a huge win for them. If you can get characters that people can connect with, both myself, an adult, I'm 30 years old, but a lifelong Trekkie, and I'm sure that kids are going to connect with the characters, which is amazing when you can get characters that both people my age, maybe even older, who grew up with the series, and children who maybe have been exposed to Star Trek by their parents, or maybe are just watching this because it's on TV, it's on Nickelodeon, they want to watch it. So I think that is a really huge achievement. The storyline is pretty cool. I'm not going to get into too much detail, but there's lots of connections to things that I think are really interesting. There's some species that we hear about in the series that we haven't heard about in a long time. So I feel like it's really connected to the grander Star Trek universe, but it's not so in your face like Lower Decks, where it's just like, oh, we'll make a reference. It's a little bit more nuanced. And it's like, yes, it's in your face in the sense they're not hiding the fact that they're referencing a species that we've seen in previous Trek, but it doesn't feel like it's going out of its way to really, shove it in your face that, hey, we're making a reference right now. So I think that really does help it. I like Lower Decks a lot, but the kinetic energy and the in-your-face references can be a little bit intense depending on the episode and depending on, I guess, even my mood, if I'm being perfectly honest. So I like the fact that Prodigy seems to connect very well with the grander Star Trek universe. And now I gotta talk about the big thing, Captain Janeway. Captain Janeway is back. She doesn't get a lot of dialogue in this episode. I'm not going to get into too many details because, again, I don't want to spoil anything. But the moment that she appears, it really was like seeing Captain Janeway again, to the point where I teared up a little bit. I'm not going to lie. I teared up because I heard the voice and she sounded older because obviously, Kate Mulgrew is older, but she still sounded like Captain Janeway. And I got a little teary. I got a bit emotional. A scene happened, and then I was fine. And then eventually we got to the end credits, which actually turned out was the opening credits. So I'm not sure if maybe the opening credits weren't in the actual beginning of the episode, because I missed that part, so I can't confirm that. But I get the feeling that, okay, they didn't show the opening credits for story reasons, so they were able to show the opening credits at the end of the episode. And I had seen them before. I thought they were great. I liked them. But I guess it was just actually having seen the episode and knowing about the characters and seeing Janeway for the first time that the credits seemed to hit me. I got teary. I don't know what it is that's what's going on, but I got teary. I like the score a lot. And the fact that, unfortunately I wasn't able to meet the composer of the series, but my buddy Dan, friend of the channel and friend of the podcast, got to interview her. And so it was really cool to be like, hey, I know someone who actually interviewed the composer for this series. How cool is that? The music I quite liked. I think I'm going to have to hear it a number of times before I get into it. I know with all Star Trek, it takes me a while for me to start really getting into a theme. I need to see it a lot. Like with Voyager, I never connected with it when I was really young, but as I started watching it more and more, I started to love the theme more and more as the show grew on me. So I'm pretty sure that's going to happen to me down the road as more episodes are released. But it felt like Star Trek. It sounded like Star Trek. The ship was really cool. I like the look of it. It is like Voyager, which makes sense because it's Captain Janeway, but it's obviously a more modernized Voyager, and it's not even an Intrepid class, but it was quick and it was nimble, and it seemed like, that's the kind of ship that Janeway could potentially be seen captaining or being on in a holographic capacity, whatever it is. But it seemed like, yep, that fits with Janeway. That fits with the character that we know and love. So I'm really quite excited. Last little thing before I go, the sound effects. The sound effects sounded like Star Trek. When they were pressing the buttons, it had the Starfleet beep, to put it that way. It just sounded like it. And that was one of my biggest complaints about Picard, is the fact that Picard did not sound like Star Trek. There was nothing that really said, hey, this is Star Trek, you're watching Star Trek, and it's going to sound like that. So I thought it was great that Prodigy did that. And I think Lower Decks should be given really huge props just because they sound like Star Trek and all the buttons sound right. The sound effects are correct. So I appreciate that. And I'm just really, really happy that Prodigy is able to embrace that so that things sounded right. The phasers were a little off, didn't quite sound like the phasers I know from Trek, but they looked right. Not only did you get to see the phasers firing, but you got to see a really nice close-up of the different phaser arcs and the little beams moving through the arcs before they actually fire. I know that sounds kind of stupid. It's very nerdy, but it's what I do. So I think overall, very happy with this series. Very excited to see where it goes. And I'm definitely looking forward to it. I'm not sure if I'm going to do a full review of the episode. I might have to go back and see if I can watch it. But I do have some other videos that I'm currently working on that are hopefully going to be up next week. At least one of them will be up next week. That is my goal. So I don't know if I'm going to do a full review of the series or not. But if you'd like me to do a full review, let me know in the comments below. But what about you? Are you looking forward to Prodigy? Are you going to check it out? Or is it one of those shows that's really not your kind of thing? Let me know in the comments below. And of course, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button so you don't miss any of my videos because I do post them all the time. And in the paraphrased words of Captain Kirk, I shall see you out there. That away.